Okay, we're so glad you picked goldseek.com radio for another Gold Nugget segment. Today's special guest, Pastor Lindsey Williams, author of The Energy Non-Crisis. Well, last week the Fed announced its much-anticipated QE3 plan to buy toxic U.S. mortgage-backed securities. But this time there's no limit placed on the purchase plan. Officials could, well, theoretically buy up to $40 billion worth of our bad home loans indefinitely. My featured guest says he's not too keen on the idea of Dr. Bernanke owning his home. Chaplain Lindsey Williams is the author of The Energy Non-Crisis. Chaplain Williams, how is the weather today in that part of sunny Arizona?
Still warm down south, Chris, and thank you so much for allowing me the privilege of being on your show today.
It's a pleasure to have you back. And I thought we could begin with the Fed's new policy that has earned the moniker QE3. The announcement certainly is a desperate move to stabilize the economy. Close to 50 million Americans require food stamps just to put food on the dinner table. 2 million American children are either homeless or below the poverty level. Mr. Bernanke says he'll buy bad mortgage debt until everyone is employed. So technically, the Fed could own practically each home loan in the U.S., sir. Please tell us what you've been hearing.
Everyone in the listening audience, I understand that someone purchased your house last week. If your house is mortgaged, somebody bought it last week. I think Chris has done a great job of summing up what Mr. Bernanke and the Federal Reserve did. After this, I had a difficulty believing I was even hearing what I was hearing. Those out in the listening audience, I'm sure many of you are new. Chris always has new people listening to his program. And very briefly, let me express why you will hear some of the statements you'll hear today. And if you know my background, then you'll understand. For a number of years ago, I was invited by the providence of God to be the chaplain to the elite of the world. And for 3 years' time, I literally lived with the people that you hear about in the World Bank, the IMF, the top oil company officials of the world. And over these past few years, I have kept in touch with some of these people. Let me assure you, there positively is a group of people on the face of the earth who control the world. They know everything that's going on. Everything is planned behind closed doors. Nothing ever happens by chance with them. And this, likewise, what they plan to do is so startling. The average American has not the slightest idea what is happening to them. As soon as I heard what Mr. Bernanke had done and what the Fed had done, I immediately picked up the phone, called my elite friend, as I like to call him. Now, keep in mind who these people are. They plan everything. They determine who the president is. They control Congress. They control OPEC. They control the nations of the world. These people literally exist. And I picked up the phone and I called one of my elite friends that I've known for years. They're up in their 70s and 80s now, retired from the biggest of the companies in America. And I said, what in this world is going on? Basically, in a nutshell, that's what I'd like to give you in the next few minutes, is that what you will not hear over the national liberal media. In fact, you won't even pick this up in any financial newsletter for weeks, because I had not the slightest idea how startling it was what I was hearing. That's what the Federal Reserve did. They stated on September the 13th, 2012, that they would begin buying $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities and Treasuries. Now, you need to be sure and note the two things that they're buying. When I called my elite friend, I said mortgage-backed securities. He said, no, Chaplain, it's mortgage-backed securities and Treasuries. They know exactly what they're doing. This was planned a long time before I ever talked with my friend. It was planned behind closed doors. They've known this for some time. It's just that you don't know it, the American public. $40 billion, no, not million, $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities and Treasuries every month, indefinitely. That means $40 billion that the Federal Reserve is going to buy in September, in October, in November, in December, indefinitely as long as they wish, every month. Now, there are three startling facts. Please, those in the listening audience, you need a pencil and paper. This is so startling. The number of people that I have talked with in the past few days since this has happened, they're beside themselves, literally dumbfounded. If I mentioned a few people I was on the phone with on yesterday and how startled they were, you'd be amazed at the names of the people, even though I'm not going to call them. You need a pencil and paper to jot down. Something is going to drastically affect your household. These three things are, number one, what the Federal Reserve will do with the mortgage-backed securities. Try to think for a moment as to what a mortgage-backed security is. Keep in mind that Mr. Bernanke says that the Fed will buy $40 billion in mortgage-backed securities. What are mortgage-backed securities? Anything that is backed by a mortgage. Yes, it's very simple, really, except that until you understand what it encompasses, number one, your house mortgage. Your house mortgage is a mortgage-backed security. There's a mortgage on your house. You went to the lending institution. You purchased it. They said, you give us the collateral of your house until you've made the last payment, and we'll give you a mortgage. And you make a payment every month. That's a mortgage-backed security. The security on that loan is your mortgage. So that means house mortgages. Yes, your house mortgage. Yes, the Federal Reserve, not your bank, not Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. No, your house will be owned by the Federal Reserve, which is not an agency of the federal government. It is a private corporation. It is not a part of the United States government any more than Federal Express is. And the Federal Reserve will own your house. Now, I'm saying this slow because it's so startling until the average American would be in the streets rioting today if they had the slightest idea as to what the ramifications of all of this is. Now, that includes your house mortgage. Let's go to the other things it is going to include. Mortgaged-backed security is any mortgage that's backed by that house or that shopping center. Did you catch it? Or that small business loan is backed by real estate of any kind. It's a mortgaged-backed security. So you're getting the message, I'm sure by now. Your house mortgages, every small business loan in the United States of America, every shopping center that is mortgaged, which they all are at the time that they're built, any type of a mortgage of any kind, the Federal Reserve will be buying them at their choice, randomly, 40 billion of them every month, indefinitely. What are they going to do with these mortgage-backed securities? Now, they will buy 40 billion every month. What are they going to do with them? Are they going to take them and put them in the vault of the Federal Reserve and just let them sit there and use them for nothing? When I tell you what my elite friend told me, I spoke on the phone with him on Saturday for approximately 45 minutes. I have never had a more startling conversation in my life. Never. And I've been talking with these people for 35 years, on and off. I have never had a conversation this startling. I asked him the question. I said, what will the Federal Reserve do with these mortgage-backed securities? They're not going to just sit there and hold them. Are you ready? I mean, folks, I hope this shatters you. I hope to goodness that you're catching the depth of this. Now, Chris, this is, I think, this is the first show I've ever given it on. Your show today. I gave a little bit of this on a show on Sunday afternoon. This It is so startling for my elite friends. You notice I even have trouble picking my words, and I am not a person who has a difficult time with the English language. I've been at it for many, many years and have lectured in many places. Normally, words are not my problem. This even startles me. Write one word down. What will the Federal Reserve do with the mortgage-backed securities? And when my elite friend gave me one word, I was speechless. In fact, I couldn't say a word on the phone for the longest. What are they going to do with them? They are going to invest them in derivatives. Now, when I explain this later on, I'm going to give you the other few points that he gave me, and then I'm going to go back and try to explain to you just how devastating this is going to be to the American people, to the American public, to the American dollar, and exactly what the New World Order group will do in using these things as a method of bringing in that New World Order peacefully, exactly as they want to do it. What will the Federal Reserve do with these? They are investing them in derivatives, the mortgage-backed securities that they buy from the banks, from Fannie and Freddie, and the lending institutions of America. They are investing that in derivatives. Second one, maybe you've thought of this already, maybe you haven't, I don't know. What are the banks going to do with the $40 billion that they're going to receive from the Federal Reserve? I hope, folks, that you're thinking a step ahead of me now. The banks are going to receive the lending institutions. There will be banks, Fannie, Freddie, many types of different lending institutions that you could have a mortgage with. What are they going to do with $40 billion? Yes, not million. $40 billion every month. When he told me what they're going to do with it and what had been planned behind closed doors, you're about to hear something that nobody except the elite know. Nobody. They don't have the slightest idea the ramifications of this. No one has heard this yet. This was only made known to the inner core of the elite, the ones who planned it all behind closed doors well in advance. And a few picked up on it on September the 13th, which was Thursday of last week. What are the banks going to do with the $40 billion that the Federal Reserve gives them? It has already been agreed. Are you catching this? It has already been agreed behind closed doors amongst the Federal Reserve and the lending institutions that the money is given to when they buy the mortgage-backed securities from those institutions, and they have already agreed behind your back, behind Congress's back, behind the back of every business in America. They have already agreed behind closed doors that the banks will use that money, $40 billion every month, to buy treasuries. I'm surprised I'm not hearing people gag over the telephone. I thought that the Federal Reserve was supposed to be helping us turn around the recession and the depression we were in. I understood that QE1, QE2, and now they're not calling it QE3, but it is QE3. I understood that all of this was supposed to be for the purpose of helping to turn this nation around financially, to get the real estate market going again, to help small businesses get the loans they want, to help get us out of the recession and depression we're in. It is the exact opposite of that. The lending institutions have already agreed that they will turn around and take that $40 billion every month and invest it in treasuries.
So, Chaplain, if I understand you correctly, and this is certainly the first I've heard of it as well, what you're telling the listeners today, the Fed and the big banks, which are essentially being bailed out on so many levels, it's difficult, I think, for us to even decipher here, are colluding. If you'll buy our toxic loans, our bad debt, we'll invest those funds in treasuries.
What you're just saying, Chris, is exactly what's happening. You have already picked it out. I was so flabbergasted when I heard this. I was beside myself. I almost wanted to hang up the phone. I had trouble believing what I was hearing. They have colluded together. You're using the exact right word. They have agreed behind closed doors. They have committed treason against the people of the United States of America. This is the most dastardly, devastating thing that has happened yet that the Fed has done. $40 billion per month, indefinitely. The Fed will buy up every mortgaged piece of real estate in the United States of America, and the Federal Reserve is not an agency of the federal government. I'm trying my best to help you see that. The elite, as I call them, the people who control the world, they are called New World Order. They want to bring in their New World Order. They do not want a communist world. I've tried my best to explain this to people recently. The elite are not communist, and the elite are not Muslim. They are using the communists and they're using the Muslims to create what they want, but their goal is a new world order, which was announced by Daddy Bush many, many years ago. And they want a new currency, they want a new world order, and they will create it. And now they have made the biggest step they have ever made right here in the United States of America, because when the Federal Reserve, please, you must catch this statement. I hope you have those pencils writing. When the Federal Reserve has completed their purchase every month of $40 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities, they will have purchased every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America, and the elite, the New World Order, as they announced it many years ago, will own your real estate. Are you catching that they're buying up America? They literally will own every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America. Well, I must go to number 3. And this, to me, was even more startling than the first points I've given you. The first point was the Federal Reserve will use the mortgage-backed securities to buy derivatives. I'm going to explain that more in depth in a few moments. Secondly, the banks will use their $40 billion per month to buy Treasuries. Collusion. That's a perfect word, Chris. Behind closed doors. That's the third thing that my elitist friend said that, to me, it shatters me. What is it that the elite, I'm not going to even use the word Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve and the elite are one and the same. What is it that the elite have learned from all of this? I'm hoping that you're catching this. What have the elite learned? They have learned a lesson from this. Last Thursday, when this happened, nobody said a word. The liberal news media didn't say a thing. I haven't heard anything on any talk show in America. And I listen, all of them that I can get in my area where I live, I listen on a regular basis to talk shows periodically through the day as I have time. I have not heard one single radio talk show pick up on this yet, because nobody knows it except the elite themselves. And if this man had not wanted to, he would not have had to have told me this, because it doesn't relate to either the Federal Reserve or the banks. But the elite learned something last Thursday on September the 13th when they did this. And this, to me, is more startling than anything else they did. They have learned that they can do anything they want to with the American people and get by with it. Did you catch that? There were no protests. There was no revolution. There was no riot in the streets. Not one single news media, not even radio talk shows, have picked up on this enough to be able to make an issue out of it. The American people have done exactly nothing. They probably haven't even comprehended yet what is going on. Basically, let me put it this way. The elite have learned that you're going to belly up. They have learned that you're not going to riot. They have learned that they can get by with anything and everything they want to get by with until they have brought in their new world order, and that they will be able to bring it in their way. And I've been trying to say this over radio talk shows for about the last 6 months that I've been on, that the elite do not want riots. They do not want revolution. They want to bring in the new world order according to their auspices. And last Thursday, they learned that they are going to be able to do this. Why? There was no protest, no revolution, no riots in the street. Nobody has said anything on the major talk shows that I know of, because they don't even know what the Federal Reserve is, and they don't know what the banks are going to do, the money they're getting, and they definitely don't know what this elite friend told me when I talked with him for 45 minutes the other day on the phone, that they finally have learned now that they're going to be able to bring in their new world order, and the American public is going to belly up, give in, and do exactly what they want. Chris, I need to pause just long enough to kind of get myself together at the same time. You realize this is one of the first times I've ever given this since I talked with my elite friend. I'm still flabbergasted. I need to pause just long enough to give you time maybe to comment.
I think the most profound thing that you've mentioned is this cooperation, I guess we'll call it, behind the scenes cooperation between the Federal Reserve and then the big banks. And as we discussed a couple of weeks ago, it's the big banks that are really already on the hook for trillions of dollars. You mentioned a figure as high as $300 trillion in these derivatives. And as we also mentioned, Warren Buffett has talked about and commented on these derivatives and referred to them as weapons of financial mass destruction. And I framed up just how dangerous these unregulated securities can be. So bringing it all together, you seem to believe that the powers that be are going to take the money that the Fed is offering to the banks and use those funds in a very nefarious way, primarily in the worst place possible.
I wonder, Chris, what the average American is going to do when they hear this for the first time. I was so flabbergasted until I was speechless. In fact, as you notice, I even have trouble today trying to get my words together, because this just could not happen in the United States of America. And I wonder what the average American is going to do when they hear this on Gold Seek Radio for the first time. You know, I would hope that this program today will literally sweep this country. It will dominate the Internet. It will get into multi-millions of homes and abroad all across the world. I hope this thing will start a movement that will bring people out to do something about it. So I'm hoping and trusting that the American people will wake up, because the dollar is doomed. It's done with. I'm going to prove that to you in just a few moments, but I have to get a few other things here first. Now, let me go into number one. What is a derivative? Now, at this point, I am going to use some of the terms that my elitist friend used on the phone. Some of them may be familiar to you, and some of them may not. First of all, he said that the Federal Reserve is going to use these mortgage-backed securities to hedge derivatives. Now, please try to understand what I'm saying when it says hedge derivatives. Chris, you'll understand this. You're in the financial world. And when he said hedge derivatives, it basically told me a term, fractional reserve. Do you have the slightest idea what fractional reserve banking is? Fractional reserve basically means that, let's say you go down to your bank and you loan them $100. You put it in a savings account. They're allowed to take $90 of that money and loan it out. And 10% they keep in reserve approximately. Now, when the Federal Reserve takes these mortgage-backed securities and they invest them in the derivative market, they will use them to hedge derivatives whereby they can multiply by fractional reserve methodology. This is the way my elite friend explained it to me, because I'm not a financial genius. He is. And he said they are going to hedge the derivative market with this. That means that they will use fractional reserve and purchase into the derivative market, and that means that $40 billion every 30 days, or every month, that is, $40 billion can be turned into well over $1 trillion. I haven't taken time to do the mathematics on this yet, Chris. If you happen to have a that can do this, if you took fractionally reserved 90% and fractionally reserved it and do it as they do in banking, and then with it hedged the derivative market, how many trillions of dollars every month would the Federal Reserve have invested in the derivative market? I would say it's well over $1 trillion.
Well, assuming a 90% fractional reserve banking standard, for each $40 billion, there would be 9 times that in additional funds available, or created, if you will. So you could say $360 billion every month. That's a new $1 trillion printed every 3 months. If we use the 50-to-1 leverage as our guidepost.
This is exactly what my elite friend told me. He didn't say $2 trillion. You just figured that. I haven't had time to figure it. That's just something. Much of this today I'm giving ad lib. I remember what he told me on the phone. I wrote myself notes as he was talking to me, and I'm trying to put all this together in an orderly fashion so that everyone out in your listening audience will get it, and hopefully this will literally spread all over the Internet within the next 24 hours. So $2 trillion is what every month the elite, the Federal Reserve, will be able to do in the derivative market. Now, I must pause here long enough to say what was told to me. I put it in my latest DVD presentation entitled Secrets of the Elite. Nobody can ever say that I didn't say it 6 months in advance before I see it taking place right in front of my eyes right here. I was told, and you'll find it recorded in my latest presentation, 3.5 hours of DVD entitled Secrets of the Elite, which you've got to have. You must have this in your house in order to spare your dinner table and save your family great heartache. I'm not even going to pick any bones about it anymore. You must know what the elite are telling me in order to save your household and spare yourself heartache. And they said to me, one of them said to me, Chaplain, the way that we're going to bring about a collapse of the financial system of the world is by collapsing the derivative market. Chris, I remembered back what my elite friend told me, which I put in my latest DVD presentation, and now I put it together with what I'm just seeing and what you and I have just calculated, $2 trillion every month, that they can now turn these toxic securities into these mortgage-backed securities. Oh, by the way, there was an expression that my elitist friend used. He called them toxic assets. You're going to hear more and more of this. If you're around people in the financial world, you'll catch it. These mortgage-backed securities can very easily be toxic assets, as he described them. Now, they can multiply them into $2 trillion, and I was told back many months ago that they would use the derivative market whenever it cracks, that they will use it to bring down every currency on the face of the earth at one time, all at one time. And the derivative market has no regulations. Numbers of times Congress has tried to put regulations on it, put bills through Congress regulating it. They have been unable to do it because the elite buy Congress off every time. They have not been able to. There's over $1 quadrillion in the derivative market as of right now, so many are predicting. And they will use a crash of the derivative market to bring down every single currency on the face of the earth when they get ready to do it. Now, it's not going to happen in the next 30 days, nor the next 60 days. They want to buy up every piece of mortgaged real estate in the United States of America before it happens. So it'll be a number of months before it takes place. But you've got to know when they're going to do it. And they told me how to know the signs as to know when it was going to happen. And that's the reason I did this latest DVD series, Secrets of the Elite. Now, they will take the derivative market, and every month add $2 trillion in toxic assets to it using fractional reserve banking until they have bought up every piece of mortgage real estate in the United States of America. Now, can you even comprehend what the world, the nations of the world, every nation, China, Japan, Russia, I'm talking about the European countries, the European Union, can you imagine when the currencies of the world collapse because of the collapse of the derivative market, and they realized that our Federal Reserve of the United States of America had initiated a plan whereby they could buy this much into the derivative market every month until they brought down every currency in the world. Can you imagine how angry the entire world is going to be at the United States of America? We think we've got problems right now in the Middle East. You haven't seen anything yet. They will awaken to the fact that unless they have it in some tangible form, it's gone. Every paper currency on the face of the earth will go at one time when they bring down the derivative market, and they plan to do it at a certain point. I have already been told that, and I have tried my best to express it to you over a period of time. Do you realize, everybody out there, that the American taxpayer is responsible for every bit of this? That's right. The Federal Reserve buying these mortgage-backed securities to $40 billion every month, they have obligated the American taxpayer. That's right. They have literally obligated the American taxpayer for what's happening to the derivative market, and we will be responsible and will be expected by the world to pay it back. $40 billion per month, indefinitely, until the elite own every piece of mortgage real estate in America.
There will be listeners who might be thinking to themselves, I'm not in harm's way. My family is okay. We pay our monthly mortgage on time. We've not fallen behind. We've not received any notices of default or any calls from collection agencies or disturbed or upset calls from our local banker. What they may not realize is whether or not you're current on your loan, on your mortgage, is irrelevant. The paper has been repackaged into these credit default swaps, into mortgage-backed securities, sliced and diced into tranches, and sold to people who have no interest whatsoever in our welfare, no interest whatsoever in whether or not we are having financial distress. They're interested only in interest. No pun intended. All of that debt is going to become even more highly leveraged, which is just a fancy financial term for debt. Leverage equals debt. So we will be leveraging, magnifying things up to maybe 50-fold. That could be somewhere between $1 or $2 trillion, depending on how much access to leverage they have. Indefinitely, because you have to keep in mind that Dr. Bernanke made it clear there's no cap on these monthly purchases. We've crossed the event horizon where the money printing presses will run around the clock until unemployment is at a agreeable level.
Where did the Federal Reserve get $40 billion every month? There's no gold, no silver, thin air. You heard it. They literally reached up into thin air, pulled out a computer entry, and give the banks $40 billion every month. And what do they get in turn for that thin air that had no backing, no regulation, do as they please? What do they get for that? They get a tangible object. They get your house. They get your land. They get your real estate. And what did they buy it with? Thin air. Same thing you breathe. You have as much right to do this as they do. Nothing. Now, I want to show you what's about to happen. Please, you have those pencils and paper, I'm sure, handy by now. I want to tell you what happened on last Thursday, just in case you didn't see it. Thursday, September the 13th, immediately after Mr. Bernanke made the announcement of what the Federal Reserve was going to do. Please write these figures down. Gold went up instantaneously, $49. Now, please write after that 3%. Silver went up $3, 9%. Gasoline went up 15 cents. That moment, your gas pump, you probably saw it out on the sign, or maybe you didn't realize what you were seeing. Gas went up 15 cents. That moment, 4%. What's going to happen every month from here on? You judge. I'm sure, have already recognized where your grocery bill is going. You thought you could go to the grocery store and buy that avocado for $1. You're going to be paying $2. That loaf of bread that you were paying $3 for, you'll be paying $5 or $6. What is going to happen every 30 days? When they pull out of thin air. Now, I'm sure you recognize that let's just take those of you who are antique collectors. If there's an item out there that there's only one like it on the face of the earth, at an antique auction, you can get a fortune for it. I mean, everybody clamors to get it. Now let's say that you produce 1,000 of those, and you go to the same auction and try to auction off 1,001. How much does each one sell for? A fraction of what that one, when it was one of a kind on the face of the earth, sold for. Now there's $1 out there, and all of a sudden Bernanke says we are going to issue 40 billion every month. What's going to happen to that one? Yeah, it's going to diminish, depreciate, its purchasing power is going to go. What happened on last Thursday is going to happen. Watch my prediction. My elitist friend has told me that they are going to bring down the dollar. They are going to bring it to the point that its purchasing power has lost so much that you lose your job. You cannot afford to maintain your business. They want to bring it to the point that you will beg for a new currency, and it'll be a new world order currency issued by the powers that be, and they've already got it planned, every bit of it. They've got to take gold prices to $3,000 an ounce because they'll back their new currency with gold and silver. They're going to take silver prices to $75 an ounce. Don't you worry. You don't pay any attention to the little bit of backsets that are out here. I am not a gold and silver dealer. You couldn't buy an ounce from me if you tried. I'm only telling you what my elite friends have told me. Those things that have value are going to go up. But listen to me, please. Last Thursday, when Mr. Bernanke made his statement, gold did not go up in price. Did you catch this? Oh, please, I beg of you to see it. Gold did not go up $49. The currency that you have, called the greenback, the Federal Reserve note, went down in purchasing power, $49, and gold still is the same 1 ounce that it was. Gasoline didn't go up in price on last Thursday. It did not. Now, in my area, gasoline at the gas pump is going up 50 cents a gallon in the past 3 weeks. It did not go up 50 cents a gallon in the past 3 weeks. It did not. The currency that you go to that gas pump and pay for that gasoline with went down 50 cents in purchasing power. Do you realize 50 cents against $4, what percentage that your currency has devalued in the past 3 weeks? Are you catching this, people? It is not the gasoline. It's still 4 quarts to the gallon. It is not the 1 ounce of gold that changed price at all whatsoever. It was the value of your currency that has gone down in value that much in 3 weeks' time in purchasing power. So you say, oh, I love what you said a moment ago, Chris. You were exactly right. I haven't received a letter from my lending institution. I'm perfectly okay. I'm up to date on my payments. You won't be long. Why? You won't be able to. When the dollar has devalued to the point that you're paying double for those groceries that you're paying right, it's going to happen. It happened last Thursday. It's going to show up at the grocery store every month. From this day forward, that Bernanke does this, the Federal Reserve does it, they are destroying the purchasing power of the dollar to the point that you will not be able to go to the grocery store and be able to afford enough food for your family for the week. You will be to the point you cannot afford to pay that mortgage, and it's going to take a matter of months to do it with this depreciation of the dollar by $40 billion every month. And it's only going to be a matter of months, and you won't be able to make that mortgage payment. And when you can't make that mortgage payment, what is the lending institution who is now owned by the Federal Reserve? You heard me correctly. Every one of the banks, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, every Wells Fargo, every one of them had been bailed out by the Federal Reserve through QE1 and QE2, and the Federal Reserve owns them right now, controls them totally. And when they take back your mortgage, the Federal Reserve owns it now because they're buying $40 billion every 30 days, every month, I should say. What is going to happen when you can't make your mortgage payment because the dollar deteriorates in its purchasing power so much? They will come in, repossess your house gladly. They will love you for all those payments you've made. They will appreciate the years you've paid on that house, but you haven't paid off the last payment yet. And they will come in, repossess that house. The Federal Reserve, the elite of the world, will turn around and rent that house back to you the rest of your life and during the life of your children and your grandchildren. And they will bring in that new world order, which is what they have wanted to do ever since Daddy Bush announced it back over 20 years ago. And what did they convince the banks to do? To turn around and buy treasuries with that money. No. You go to the bank and try to get a house mortgage today. I had a friend of mine just this weekend. I was talking with some people about some of this after I received it. I was so dumbfounded. And he's a very wealthy man. And he said, Chaplain, I've got $2 million in the bank. I said, that's dangerous. You shouldn't. He said, well, that's the way it is. And he said, if I went to the bank and wanted to buy a $1 million house, they would not give me a mortgage right now. I said, what do you mean? He said, tell any small business to go and try to get a small business loan. He said the banks won't loan it. He said they'll make you fill out a form this month and next month and the next month and the next month. They'll keep you on the hook and month after month, and then they'll finally tell you 6 months from now, we're sorry. Even though you've got the money in the bank, we can't give you a loan. They aren't doing it. What are they doing with that money? They're taking the money that the Federal Reserve has given them for these toxic assets, these mortgages, mortgage-backed securities, and the banks are taking that money and investing it in treasuries by a approved behind closed doors. They're not putting it in small businesses. They're not putting it to improve the economy of the United States of America. They're not using that money to try to get you out of the recession. It's already been agreed behind. Now, you mark my words. $40 billion a month that the banks now have to be able to loan out to people, and you try to get a loan in the next 30 days. Now, go do it. You small businessmen and you folks that want a house mortgage, you go try to get a mortgage from. Now, the banks have got it. They've got $40 billion a month now to be able to play with, and you go try to get a loan from them. You won't get it. Why? It's already been agreed ahead of time to put them into treasuries. So you're beginning to see what's happening now. I want to come down to what the elite really have in mind. They want to own every piece of mortgage real estate in America. They want to be able to bring about a collapse of the American dollar. They do not want riots. They do not want revolution. They want to bring in the new world order according to their plans. And as of right now, they proved on September the 13th, they proved on that Thursday that the American people are not going to do anything about it. They're going to accept it. And from this point on, they have everything right where they want it. So, looking, if you will, at derivatives, I would suggest to you, you must immediately do a crash course on derivatives. You've got to know what they are. I know they're very complicated instruments, but you can learn what they are, and you can learn when the derivative market is going to collapse before it happens, there is a formula that the elite gave me whereby I, my family, and that we can save our assets. Anything that we've got in paper, we can get out before it collapses. And just a matter of weeks ago, the elite gave me, my elitist friend, gave me the formula. He said, Chaplain, you need to know before it happens so that you can spare yourself. And they did it out of courtesy because of me giving 3 years of my life to be their chaplain. He said, Chaplain, I want you to know how to be able to help save your house. And he gave me the formula whereby a person can know in advance before the derivative market collapses, and in turn can get out of every piece of paper you've got just in time, keeping in mind that in 1929 through 1933, there were many people who made great fortunes. They knew that the Depression was coming. They knew it before it happened, and they got into the proper assets. They got into out of paper and into other things, and as a result, they did not stand in the soup lines in New York and San Francisco and Washington. They were able to survive the Great Depression. You can too. And you must. This is so critical that you positively must know what is taking place long before it happens so that you can keep food on your table and you can defeat the elite, you as a family. I'm hoping that somehow this literally sweeps this nation so that people will wake up as the result of what the elite have told me here just recently. Chris, I've got a few other things here, but you go ahead. Let me let you break in for a moment, and I'm sure you have some thoughts.
First thing that comes to mind here, when folks start to become concerned about inflation, which sounds inevitable given the scenario that you have laid out here, inflation, of course, becomes the big problem. And as many of my listeners now are very well versed in inflation hedging, gold and silver investments. Why? Well, because gold and silver hold their purchasing power over time. Really nothing holds its purchasing power amid rising prices better than the precious metals. Now that we're talking about anywhere from $40 billion per month, sounds to me like we could be on the cusp of hyperinflation. It could be the first time that this nation as a whole could experience something similar and perhaps even rivaling even the Weimar Republic of the 1920s. And then, of course, Zimbabwe more recently, and we had many episodes of hyperinflation, as my listeners know, in Central Europe, as well as South and Central America in the 1990s. I'm sure that Pastor Williams has some excellent thoughts on how the typical listener can protect their families from what's coming.
Those in your listening audience will remember other shows I've been on and also the time that I've been with you before, that a number of years ago, I was talking with one of my elite friends, and I was flabbergasted. I was beside myself. I was almost speechless at that time, and I said, okay, you're telling me that the New World Order is going to do all of these things. I said, now, I did the best I could to help you people years ago. I said, what can you do to help me know what to do for my family? And he said, Chaplain, there's only one way that you can maintain your purchasing power with what you have. And I said, what is that? And he said, that's our money. And I said, what is your currency? And many of you have heard me say this before. He told me, he said, Chaplain, our currency is gold and silver. He said, we don't depend on paper. He said, yes, we have a certain amount of paper. But he said, we don't have any more than we can afford to lose. He said, our currency is gold and silver. And he said, there's only one thing, one place, one way whereby you can maintain your purchasing power. And he said that is in gold and silver. Now, that was approximately 3.5 years ago, Chris. And I've said it on radio shows all over America. And I begged, I pleaded, I got on my knees almost over the radio and begged people to go and buy every ounce of gold and silver they could possibly get. Back when my elite friend told me that first time, gold was $600 an ounce. And I begged them, I said, go and buy every piece you can get your hands on. Now, of course, it's 1,700 plus this morning, and people are looking back and saying, oh, my goodness, I wish I had done what your elite friend told you back then. there is only one place that you will spare your assets. Only one. You can't do it in the Wall Street stock market. You can't do it with mutual funds. You can't do it with IRAs. You can't do it with 401ks. You cannot do it with anything that is paper. Nothing. In fact, if it's written on a piece of paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. He said, Chaplain, there's only one way you'll do it. And he said, that's gold and silver. This morning, I was thumbing the radio channels, listening to all of the people I could before I went on your show after I got up this morning, Chris. And I noticed that one of the gold dealers locally was advertising 1 ounce gold for sale, American Eagles. And he was advertising it at night. Now, this was with his premium added on, and whatever else he adds on, I don't know. And it was over the radio. This was not a dealer that I have anything to do with necessarily, but he was over the radio, and he was advertising 1 ounce gold Eagles for sale at $1,975, right at $2,000 by the time they've added on all of their add-ons. Folks, it's exactly what my elite friend told me 3.5 years ago when I could have bought it when people could have bought it for $600 an ounce. It's right now close. It's $1,700 and some odd by the time they add on their premiums. It's way up there. It's the only place. Now, there is one thing, and Chris, I'll mention these words because here again, my elitist friend, being as knowledgeable as he is, he said, Chaplain, there's one thing that the feds are going to attempt to do. And Chris, you'll be very interested in this, especially because of your connection with the monetary system. He said, Chaplain, they will raise the margin requirements on gold and silver. He said they're going to try to do it. Now, Chris, this will be encouraging to you. After QE1 and QE2, every time gold and silver would go up significantly, they would raise the margin requirement. Some of you who really know finances, you'll understand this. I've dipped into it and asked my elite friend numbers of questions, so at least I understand the basics of it. They would raise the margin requirements on gold and silver. He said, they'll try this again, but, are you ready? He said, Chaplain, I don't think we're going to be able to do it this time. He said, we've gotten the margin requirement so high. He said, I don't think we're going to be able to control that spike in gold and silver prices as we've tried to do under QE1 and QE2. They even themselves are wondering what the outcome of all of this is going to be. And I am sitting here wondering also what the American people are going to think when they hear the presentation that's been given this morning on Gold Seek Radio, and hoping that this will literally sweep the internet with people getting knowledge of what's taking place. And folks, whatever is necessary, that you will stop the Federal Reserve. You will stop the elite dead in their tracks. They must be stopped from what they're doing because they literally will destroy the American dollar. Now, here's what's going to happen. The dollar is going to diminish so much in its purchasing power until it will become dead. Not non-existent, but dead. It will have so little purchasing power that you will wonder how you can feed your family on what you're making in a week's wages, how you will ever put enough gasoline in that gas tank after the week's wages that you've made. It's not that it will be non-existent. The dollar's going to be there for a long time yet. And by the way, all of you who are receiving food stamps, Social Security, welfare, your Medicare, your Medicaid, you keep getting your checks. You're going to keep getting your money. What will it buy? What will that Social Security check buy when they have destroyed the purchasing power of the dollar to the point? $40 billion every month, and not one penny of it being put back into our economy by the banks, but rather being put into treasuries. And what do those treasuries buy? Do you have the slightest idea that the Federal Reserve issues T-bills and treasuries every so many days in order to get enough money from the super wealthy and the nations of the world to pay the interest on the national debt? That's all that treasuries do anymore, is pay the interest on the national debt. And basically the Federal Reserve is having the banks turn around now and buy treasuries so that they can pay the interest on the national debt to keep the dollar afloat until they The elite of the world are ready to collapse it by collapsing the derivative market. I know I've said a whole course on finances in about 5 minutes here, but this is what you're going to see happen to the American dollar. You think that you can make that house payment? No, you'll lose it. The dollar, because of its purchasing power, is collapsing that much right before our eyes, Chris.
As we've mentioned in the past on the show, inflation is a very cruel tax indeed, and it hurts the folks who can prepare for at least the working and the middle classes. It's decimating the middle class, and only the folks who have had the foresight and the means to prepare for this inflationary collapse will likely come out unscathed. Pastor Williams, you really haven't touched on this much, and we don't have too much time for it today, but as Gerald Celente has said here on the show in the past, when people lose everything, they just lose it. And he's quite concerned that as 100 million or more Americans wake up and realize that they have been hoodwinked by the Fed and their officials, that civil unrest and looting and rioting could become a commonplace occurrence here. What are your thoughts, sir?
That's exactly what the elite are afraid of also. Now, once again, let me express what I said a moment ago. They do not want riots. They do not want civil unrest. They have already done away with the protest Wall Street movement. I guess you might have noticed in the financial news out of London this morning, the picture on the front page of the protest Wall Street group. They're so small, they hardly even amount to anything now. They did away with them. The elite did. They literally have died. They don't want protests. They don't want riots. They want to bring in the new world order by their methods. Let me tell you basically what they want. They want to gradually, like a frog boiling in a pot scenario, every month, depreciate the purchasing power of the American dollar until your children are crying because you cannot afford with a week's wages to go to the grocery store and buy the groceries that you need for your family. And at that point, when your children are crying and you're begging for some relief, and you know that your congressmen have already betrayed you, and you elected the wrong people in the last election, and you didn't throw out every one of the scoundrels that had been there over 2 terms because every one of them are bought out, and you elected one of their men, and all of a sudden you get in desperation, and at that point you'll cry. Who would you cry to? You'll cry to the New World Order, is what they want. And they want you to be able to say, please, oh please, we'll give up our Constitution. We'll give up our currency. We'll give you anything you want. Just put food back on our table. And the New World Order will step in at that point and give you everything you want. They will give you a new currency that has a gold and silver backing. They'll give you relief from your problems. Mark my words. And they'll do it right at the point at which they think that you're going to riot and turn everything upside down like they're doing in Greece today. And then they'll give you what you need, just enough to be able to satisfy you. Rent your house back to you that they've already repossessed. Rent your automobile back to you that you've repossessed, and your boat. And they'll give you football and apple pie every week, and give you just enough to keep you satisfied with a new world currency. And this is what the elite are hoping that they can do and bring in their new world order.
There's quite a precedent for what you have laid out here today. I'd like to take us back to the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, famous for saying that when the bankers get control of your national currency, it doesn't matter what your legislators, what your leaders, what your officials may try to do to help the people. The bankers are ultimately in control. A founding father, Thomas Jefferson, said if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issuance of their money, first by inflation and then by deflationary collapse, the banks and corporations that grow up around us will deprive the people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent that their forefathers conquered. And here we are today, 250 years later, coming to pass right before our very eyes.
I do agree with Thomas Jefferson. I think his statement was prophetic, if there's such a thing as that being the case. And we are seeing it right before our eyes. And I beg and I plead with everyone out there, save your household heartache. I would urge you, will you please call our toll-free number? My toll-free number is 1-888-799-6111. It's 3.5 hours long, DVD, professionally done. You can watch it on your television set at home. I also give you, as of a few days ago, a CD, an hour and 12 minutes long, that you can play as you're riding down the road in your automobile. You can play it in your CD player that will tell you everything that the elite suggested to me that I should do for my family in order to save us heartache. And every bit of this is prepared to try to help you. Our toll-free number for the Secrets of the Elite DVD and the CD, which we'll give to you with the DVD set, is 888-799-6111, or you can go on the web to prophecyclub.com, prophecyclub.com, and you will see the details on our new DVD series. Now, basically, in a nutshell, the elite said to me, this was a number of months ago, they said, Chaplain, you must secure your assets. And I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. And they said, anything that's tangible, you must get out of paper. And you must get into anything tangible. A tangible can be many things. It can be a garden in the backyard that the land's paid for. And you may need it. It could be a paid-for roof over your head, not mortgaged, but paid for. Get out of debt every way you humanly possibly can. I'd rather live in a log cabin in the middle of nowhere than to live in $1 million mansion that's got a mortgage on it that the Federal Reserve is going to take back from you because they will own your mortgage-backed security, and they've already invested it in the derivative market, which is dastardly. It is so evil until it's almost unbelievable what they're doing with the derivative market because of this. You must get into tangibles of every kind, gold, silver, whatever it may be. You must get into tangibles. In a nutshell, watch this happen. And you who have access to some of the financial wires, you're going to see this take place. Now, the Federal Reserve is taking this $40 billion every month, and they're buying mortgage-backed securities. Then they will take that mortgage-backed security. Now, let's just take one out of the thousands of mortgage-backed securities that they can buy, and let's say, for instance, that it is your house. I care not whether it's paid for or not paid for, whether you're making the payments or whether you're not making the payments, whether you're upside down, it matters not. It's a mortgage on a piece of property, and they bought it by pulling out of thin air nothing. And they bought it from the lending institution that you have your loan with. And they take that house mortgage, and they fractionally reserve it and put it on the derivative market. Let's say that your house is worth $100,000. And so they take that $100,000 and they sell on the derivative market to some bank in Europe your mortgage. That's right. The Federal Reserve took out of thin air nothing and bought your house mortgage. And they're going to turn around and sell it, fractionally reserve it. Now, that bank over in Europe, I mean, doesn't this make you angry? Doesn't this upset you? And then that bank over in Europe takes that $100,000 mortgage and it uses it to leverage a purchase in an oil well in North and South Dakota on the Bakken field. And on and on and on and on this derivative goes until it multiplies into not only $100,000 but many of hundreds of thousands in this Las Vegas one-arm bandit system called derivatives. And it all began because the Federal Reserve took out of thin air nothing and bought your house mortgage and leveraged it all over the world. And they're not even an agency of the federal government. And they're not out there to help improve the living conditions of a person in the United States of America. Chris? I think I've probably said as much as I can say. I hope people are getting it, and I thank you immensely for allowing us to help get this out everywhere possible, as quick as possible.
Pastor Williams, it's always a pleasure hearing your thoughts. You've laid out a very interesting and compelling case to start preparing right now. We're going to look forward to your next installment, and we wish you continued success.
Chris, Lord bless you, and to everyone out there that listens to this, may I suggest that before you do any of the things that I or anyone else would suggest to you, that you first of all set your spiritual house in order. You must go to the Bible and be sure that you know Jesus Christ is your Savior, that the Word of God is your guide, that you will allow your home to be established on the solid rock of Christ Jesus, so that when these storms come, you'll be on a solid rock instead of on sinking sand. Please set that spiritual house in order before you do anything else. And Chris, Lord bless you, and I wish you the very best.